My investigative sources tonight are former Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe, former Boston Police Commissioner Ed Davis, as well as the creator of the FBI's active shooter program, Katherine Schweit. It's great to have you all here. And Katherine, let me start with you because we're learning new information tonight from my colleague Shimon Prokupez about what investigators are looking at tonight. And they were saying that at this press conference that's coming up, they're hoping they can reveal a lot more information about this shooter, about what they've learned here. And what Shimon is hearing is that this person planned the attack in advance and that they indicated that information that was gathered by investigators suggested that the shooter had been dealing with problems. What exactly kind of material and what kind of clues are investigators looking for in something like this?
Hi, good evening. In some ways, none of that is a surprise. We kind of know the framework of what we'll see. This is targeted violence that occurs in schools. Is generally an individual who attends that school. Almost in every instance, they attend the school or they just got kicked out or just left the school. So what they do is they plan and prepare to do this kind of violence because they can't find any other solution. And so their other solution is, okay, I'm going to do this. We saw the same thing that happened up at Oxford High School where the shooter indicated in writing that he had tried to tell his parents he needed mental health care and he didn't get it. So I think that's the kind of things that we'll see. A student who is having trouble, remember, we're about at exam week for finals in many of these schools and break. And Mondays are a very common day to see this because students, especially in schools, in middle schools and high schools, they are stressed out over the weekend and they formulate this plan and then they moxie up, they get the courage to execute it on Monday.
Well, and we don't know the name of the shooter yet. That's what we're waiting to see if the authorities are going to release that. But Commissioner, you know, when you look at the profile of what we do know so far, that this was a female shooter. When you look at the Washington Post, since 2006, of the 482 deadliest mass shootings in America, just 3% are known or suspected to have been committed by a female shooter. What did that say to you when you learned that tonight?
Well, Caitlin, it was a shock to me. It's so unusual to have a female shooter in a situation like this. I really am waiting to hear what the backstory is here. Were there signs? Were there things that she was experiencing in school or that she was communicating to other people around her that should have been a trigger here, but because she was a female, people didn't pay attention to it as much as they would if it was a male? These are all things that we need to drill into here. And a lot of what we're saying right now is speculation because we don't know what the details are. But I can tell you this, there's a religious community there and a community government that needs to provide wraparound services to the kids and the teachers that were affected today. It has to go beyond looking at the reasons for it. And also there has to be a response to make sure that this trauma they've experienced, especially in this season, is properly taken care of. So I don't know what to tell you about the fact that it's a female, except that this is extremely unusual.
Yeah, I mean, just hearing from that second grader there, I mean, for any student that went through this, obviously, and Andrew McCabe, you're here with me. When you are looking at this, I noted the police presence that is at what we believe is the home of the suspected shooter. They said the parents were cooperating when we last heard from the authorities. They were waiting to see what detectives gleaned from them in that interview. What are detectives asking these parents?
Well, it's important to, to go the full length of executing a search warrant at the residence because you never know what other sort of evidence you might recover. Obviously, there's not someone who's going to be facing prosecution here. The shooter, we're told, took their own life. But there's all sorts of pieces of information that could shed light on that question of motive to help us better understand the sorts of things, the process that this person went through before they decided to make this decision, the sort of planning they went through, what sort of flags or things should we have seen and should have been noticed along the way. And so seizing that evidence of computer devices, internet-connected devices, writings, all that stuff is very important. And as a part of that, they're no doubt talking to the parents. And those questions are probably pushing in the same direction, Caitlin. They're trying to find out, let's build a timeline of where your, in this case, daughter has been over the last 48, maybe 72 hours, and what did you see? What did you observe? And going back, was your daughter struggling with mental health issues and that sort of thing? And it is all just to build as rich a picture of this event and the events that led up to it as they possibly can.
Yeah, and Katherine, I mean, if you're looking at this and you're sitting down with those parents and talking to them, what kind of questions would you be asking them in terms of not just that background and a potential timeline here, but also the gun? We are told it was a 9mm pistol, an incredibly common type of gun in the United States. What other kind of questions would detectives be asking these parents, given they are cooperating with them?
Yeah, I worked in our FBI office up in Wisconsin, so I was in Madison plenty of times. And, you know, it's not unusual to have guns in the house. I think the first question is, you know, was this person, did this young lady have access to weapons? How did she have the access to that weapons? Because I do think, as Andrew's saying, you know, that's something that we have to nail down. What kind of access did she have? Did she have the ability? Is there some state violation or federal violation about her having access to guns? But in addition to that, I would, you know, you have to, as an investigator at this point, you have to say to parents who are grieving the loss of their child, we know that, you know, maybe you didn't see, but can you think back to things that in retrospect can help us to understand so this kind of tragedy can't happen again? Because you want to gather and get those facts out of the parents, but you have to recognize those parents, they've also just lost a child.
Yeah, and as they're looking at that and taking all of this into consideration, Commissioner, I mean, you know, we don't yet know how the student got the gun. There is a law in Wisconsin, as Katherine noted, it requires guns to be stored in a way that children cannot reach them, but that's only if the kid is under the age of 14. We're dealing with a student that we are told was 17 years old here.
Right, and I think that's why it's really important to drill down into whether or not there were indicators and whether the family had an enhanced responsibility to isolate those weapons. If there's been any suicidal or homicidal ideation in the child, those are all incidents that may happen that would drive someone to take special precautions. And I think they'll be looking into all of these issues to see if something could have been done to stop this.
Yeah, and that's something that they were emphasizing earlier when we were hearing from these officials about, you know, what were the signs, were they there? They were saying that very often is the case. This is a small private school, I should note, Andrew McCabe, that we're talking about here. When the investigator or when the authorities give their update at 9:30, it's the fourth update of the day. What are you going to be listening for? What do you think is the most important thing for them to be getting out in that moment?
Well, it's obviously the information about the shooter, which we're still waiting to receive. That'll be a big moment to ultimately reveal to the community who's committed this horrible offense. But I think it's also likely that we're going to start hearing questions to law enforcement about the security measures that were taken or maybe not taken that could have had an impact on this
there was
no
resource officer and no metal detectors at this very small private Christian school.
That's right. And I don't think that that's uncommon. I mean, there's many schools across the country that don't have those sorts of resources, but no doubt this community is going to go through a lot of soul searching on issues like that. How do we better protect our children, and at what cost? Are we turning our schools into kind of armed prisons, essentially? So it's these are tough issues for any community to get around, and I would expect that as we get further away from the tragedy, people will be focusing on those things more intently.
Yeah, everyone stand by because we are going to be taking that press conference live when it happens. Thank you all for joining with your expertise on this matter.